music is difficult to play because humor is difficult. Tragedy is easy in art. Art is artifice, and humor is life, and it has to be fine-tuned. In the case of Beethoven's third movement, in this first piano concerto, he uses playfully, cunningly, this grace note that is kissing the real note. I suggest to have it played together, while the real note, in this case the A compared to the B flat, plays louder. So in slow motion it's slightly longer and slightly louder than the playful grace note that just kisses the appoggiatura on top. And then there is, of course, the middle section of it, which is those of Italianate with left hand sort of jump accompaniment. You can almost see Mario jump over it. Mamma mia, mamma mia, or something like that. So anyway, it's fun, but of course the difficulty is to play it precise, and left hand shifting have to be so well organized, because if you play it chronologically from the bottom up, that is not exactly right, because it's difficult, of course, to be precise. You want to practice the dotted rhythm for the shifting, but also you want to avoid the decision that you'll take when you go from the high note to the next bass, not to have the shifting become the choreography of the space between the notes and the beats. So no have semicircle. It's tempting but not precise. I mean, it's in fact visually it is the beat. The space between the beat you visualize like on an analogic clock. You see the difference between 5 minutes. Whenever on a digital clock you don't see that space. It's only digits. And here I think it's more practical and more less artistic in the point of view of the visual aspect, or less spontaneous, but very pragmatic. Always touch and be in front of the key before you play it. Like, and you count how many you missed, and then you start again. Or in Paganini of Schumann's Carnival, and then the comic aspect or the humorous aspect of music to become a laughable matter for your own playing. It has to be fun as an artistic point of view, but not fun because your audience counts how many times you missed. I always think it's important to shift faster than the tempo, therefore count in order not to rush, and be in front of the note before you have to play it. In Beethoven, of course one can make it into a space memory and practice is close the eyes. But the best thing is to obtain a shifting that allows you really to have a third hand, basically for the distant basses. And the humor in music can become humor on oneself, but if you maintain that practical shifting for the distances, you can reach the right note more than less often the real one, the right one. To come back to Beethoven's last movement of this first concerto, the humorous part in the opening part is that the piano plays the upbeat but equal to the downbeat, so it gives an impression that you have an extra eighth note. There's the playfulness in it. It's cunning, it's tricky, is pitchy, is but it's not obvious. It's not like a big laughter. It's more like before the orchestra picks up the theme, and then the orchestration heavily insists on the downbeat. So it's like an explanation. Whenever in the opening there is no accent on the downbeat to make it explanative. It's more like which one is it? Downbeat, upbeat? I don't know. Playfully. Then the orchestra. That's same theme, therefore with the grace notes. Another example comes to mind is, of course, Mozart's G major concerto K453, the finale. It's a very happy Ländler, popular theme, probably, if not nursery song, the kind of song that probably craftsmen in the city were whistling. This kind of quality of popular music, it's humorous to us because it's so spirited and jolly and lively, and different from the more elaborated and, let's say, classically trained first themes in first movements, like in the same concerto. With a cacciaturras, with upbeats, with grace notes, with everything. And here is just plain good-natured. And I think after slow movements, which tend to be extremely deep in the dramatic sense of the philosophical self-search, it's like the end of the slow movement in question. While in C major, his C minor shadows. Smile with a tear, and then course, the theme is played over and over, and the piano plays more and more notes, and it's supposed to be just a big ball of fun, and which it is. Of course, there is one variation in this unusual finale, which is not rondo but theme and variations. If it's like in the operas of Mozart, very often typical for the 18th century of in his area of the world, masks, everything is masks. Everybody pretends to be what they're not. Everybody is commedia dell'arte in reality, or life in theater, theater in life. And sometimes the tears are just fake, like in Così, in order to test the fidelity of the spouse. And so we know it. They play masked plays all the time, and so sometimes those tears, the sadness is a bit fake, but believably so. It's kind of little Bach chromatic Goldberg variation imitation, I would say boring. Of disbelief in this case, because this kind of farcic echo is almost suggesting that it's fake tears. This is the tear, and then commedia dell'arte, and then immediately this laughter. It's like operatic laugh, so we realized it was all farcic. And then the coda. Basically, we realize it's just a commedia dell'arte, opera buffa, and sheer joy, or at least hefty laughter. And when one thinks about this kind of borrowing, there is a Schumann Carnival, so the title by itself already suggests these exaggerations in characters and this kind of comical point of view. You have Pierrot, a sad clown, and this kind of complaint, nya na na. That interrupts constantly his song, as if making fun of him while he's complaining. That's how I see it in that sense. And in the Carnival, even if the titles are not all of his for each movement, of course you have most commedia dell'arte with Pantalon and Colombine. Chasing each other. And these characters are so playful, and it's obvious. And of course, there is two of the pieces are for composers, and one, of course, is the Paganini, which I hinted earlier, where he makes fun of, not fun. He portrays in a sarcastic way, but lovingly so, I think, Paganini's virtuosity, which was so formidable for the day, almost unbelievable. Sorry for these wrong notes. I'll take it again. The two hands can't almost catch each other, and it's to restart. Concert I can't do that, but thank you for indulging. And then the other composer he makes fun of is Chopin. You would think it's waltz? No, it's this imitation of a Chopin nocturne, but almost sarcastically. Level of humor, even if it's tender, but it's not funny per se. It's just that he includes two composers as characters of this carnival. Well, in terms of humor, generally it's a release from the tension of the dark thoughts, or perhaps of the more philosophical situations. And in the case of the famous concerto by Mozart 488 with the Siciliana in undescribable sadness, the coda of this movement being to weep. And then the piano starts. Frankly happy, as if to break with this immediately breaking with this great sadness. But in terms of borrowing, there is something perhaps very striking, humorous or not, or perhaps Beethoven himself, being as a young pianist, having played Mozart concerto, was close to Mozart's music, like all Viennese composers, since they're almost contemporaries. There is the slow movement of the C minor sonata by Mozart, where the middle section states, no, that was the joke. I was playing humor. In fact, it's almost, it was because of that. That's Beethoven's pathetic slow movement, of course, in A flat major. But listen to Mozart's. Is it just serendipity? Is it just... it was in the air? Or is it a quotation, perhaps? The same area of the keyboard in the same tonality, with the same melodic line that has exchange of voice with the bass. I don't know if I can classify it in humor in music or borrowing, or perhaps because of it it's humorous, or just perhaps just a smile to quote. Perhaps it was just that Beethoven meant, but it is quite striking, and it would be even more striking if we know that Beethoven perhaps never knew that slow movement of this Mozart sonata. But chances are he did, and most chances are that he did, in geographic terms and time-wise, but that is something that remains always striking when one hears it in performance. because the reminiscence of the famous Beethoven's one comes in mind when one hears that in the C minor Sonata K457 by Mozart. And also there is opening of Mozart's concerto in question that I just played earlier for the last movement, the K453, and the G minor Schumann Sonata. Each slow movement of both. C major in the middle of the key of the keyboard. The resemblance is striking. So I keep it for the smile part, not so much for the laughing part. Because in terms of humor and laughter, Haydn knows a lot. And like D major concerto. And his symphonies on the clock and his toy symphonies, a lot of obvious connections to humor, but musically speaking, in the thematic material, it is very much him who probably inspired Mozart and Beethoven to their own humorous sections in music. Even the last movement of the C minor concerto by Beethoven, when he goes to the coda in major, it's almost catch me, playful and fun, but fun like a laughter. It has something of a liberating laugh, musically speaking, that's what I see. But perhaps everybody does in their own way, and surely so. Humor being the hardest thing to translate in situation comedy or in words, it is so connected to its context and its culture that outside of it some things are not funny to some and some things are more funny to others. Whenever tragedy and drama is relatively more universal, pain, hope, love, or the love of the pain of the hope, or the hope of the love of the pain, the Romeo and Juliet's situations and stories, operas are everywhere. Actually, there would be no opera without such drama of contradictory situations, of impossible love and hatred and all that. So the drama is more universal, but humor is more more restricted to the culture in order to even taste the humor of it. Sometimes we pass next to something that perhaps was meant as a funny quote or comment or borrowing, but we don't either realize it or we really don't know it. Or if we do, then we take it very seriously. So it's a very difficult topic. But in any case, performing the music brings us to always search for the characterization. To take another example of Schumann's Carnival, which gives us plenty of that. We have a movement about Coquette, the vain girl. You can almost see her laugh. Rather, not see, hear. Personally, that there is more humor, but in the musician's point of view, in the end of the opening of this section, where it's one of the first times that the composer writes a change of meter within a piece in this classical era, even if it's the beginning of Romanticism. And probably for this time period where everything was always put in bar numbers, bar meters that are equal, to have this extra beat in the 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 4/4, 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 4/4, of course. With Stravinsky and all composers of the 20th century who change a meter per bar, we have this sense of constantly breaking and pulse breakage. But in Schumann's time, it was probably one of the innovations, and he probably used it most likely here in a farcical way. It's a way to be unstable. Also in one of his novelettes. Anyway, sometimes he introduces this kind of change of extra beat in something which is otherwise extremely organized in the same meter. Going up is really like a big laughter. So the humor is more like gentle, tender, good meant, not always sarcastic, ironic as Shostakovich, Prokofiev in darker days of their lives survived through the irony. Humor is often the elegance of desperate people, and that's a very elegant way to mean it. But this is more like not the example I just gave. Humor is also, in music, very often something like a gentle reminiscence of something else. For instance, for me at least, when J.C. Bach writes, and Mozart writes, you can argue, everybody can drop few notes of a half a scale, and it's funny, actually, probably it's just a gentle borrowing. After all, Mozart's child met J.C. Bach in London, and Bach gave him his early sonatas, well, which became the early Mozart concerti when Mozart adapted them. So there is a kinship there. Would it be humor? Probably not. Probably just a mirror, smile, thank you, or yeah. Perhaps that's exactly what Beethoven did in the slow movement, or unwillingly or unconsciously, compared to Mozart's. Or Schumann in this pristine C major, and Mozart's Schutzart. It doesn't work. To start the one and finish the phase of the other, it's really adding more to the collage humor than it has, or it needs. And Shostakovich cello sonata has this Czerny section at the end, and so many pieces come in mind about this thought about laughter in music, or perhaps humor in music more than laughter. Examples of the 18th century, Haydn, Mozart and Beethoven early, happen to be with grace notes. So the grace note is this playful kissing of the appoggiatura without real resolution in a staccato mood, staccato, staccato. that was the way to hint and suggest that kind of spontaneous laughter instead of the organized appoggiatura with resolution. Even Bach has these moments of burst after the slow movement of the Italian concerto. I situated more here about the two scales in the two hands trying to catch each other and not finding each other. Well, they do, obviously. In the same key of F major. Well, you would say any Bach fugue is try to catch me the voicing. That's true. And that, I must say that perhaps is not, if not humorous, at least is spirited and light-hearted and gives a sense of uplifting to the soul. For instance, the fact that it starts on a second note, it's always very important. How do you mention to an audience that the eighth note rests accented in the beginning is, except you have a conductor and you watch him do the gesture, that it doesn't start on that? Obviously, you have to impulse a little bit more heavily the beat. La, do, fa, mi, re, do, re, do, si, la, si, la, sol, fa, la, do, la, fa, do, la, do, si, do, la, do, si, do, la, do, si, do, fa, la, sol, la, fa, la, sol, la, fa, la, sol, la, re, mi, fa, re, mi, fa, re, sol, re, si, fa, re, sol, la, si, mi, fa, mi, re, do, re, do, si, la, re, do, si, la, si, la, sol, la, si, fa, mi, do, si, do, mi, fa, do, mi, re, si, do. Okay, I'm not going to solfege the piece, though sometimes I manage with age to solfege faster than I can play. But it's so much fun to chew the music, put it in the mouth. Perhaps it's part of the humor too. Mi, mi, re, do, mi, mi, re, do, mi, mi, re, do, si, la, sol, la, fa, sol, la, fa, sol. Just to tell it to yourself like that, it almost like spirits you highly. Mi, mi, re, do, mi, mi, re, do, mi, mi, re, do, si, la, sol. It's just a childish habit to solfege everything. That doesn't mean play it very well, actually. As a matter of fact, in my childhood I had to copy from memory the pieces I was learning and then play them. And that by the time I played them I knew them musically well, but finger-wise it didn't fit so well, so I had to relearn them for the fingering. Nevertheless, putting it in the mouth, speaking it to oneself, it's another way of owning the piece other than just by the finger memory, which is essential for most pianists, but shouldn't be the only connection to the piece, even if it's part of the fun of playing music, of course. More than part is the essential part, is to enjoy playing it. So when you play these kind of things, you're enjoying it. There's no way, you cannot say else. And even in Chopin's E major, in E minor concerto, the E major coda. Sorry for that. Finishes in this kind of rejoicing finale, instead of having only the E minor dramatic sense that goes to the whole piece. But then Chopin is very good with his mazurkas or his krakowiaks to use the dance or inspiration of the dance of his country. And for instance, the krakowiak dance in the last movement of the same concerto. Obviously, it comes as a welcome relief after the slow movement with this leap and jump. And Even Tchaikovsky in his concerto uses something very popular, even if in B-flat minor. Relative major, obviously. And here the humor is that the orchestra is in 2 with the piano in 3. Playfulness of catch me if you can, grab me and I'm going to escape you. So this kind of pulse, dialogue of pulses is very much of the case. In Bach's C minor second partita, the Caprice or Capriccio in the last movement. Oops, sorry. The reason for which I give this example is because in the middle of it you have a rarely used by Bach, but in this case very much comically used, leap jumps of tenths, just like Beethoven. And here, so this kind of jumps make it suggestive of an unbalanced comical effect of jumping so far away. And of course, in the case of Tchaikovsky concerto, and in the case of the Bach finale, they're so spirited and driven and rejoicing, while both in minor mode, B-flat minor, C minor. So the mode doesn't always supplant the feeling. Of course, it's more obvious to make good humor in major than humorous escapes in minor key. But sometimes that was the case, at least with Tchaikovsky's finale and Bach's Capriccio from the C minor partita, which is also humorous by itself, since it's one of the only partitas that doesn't have a jig as a finale. So just by not using a jig, it's already a nice blink that Bach is doing us of the eye, saying, haha, I do something else to surprise you. So, and of course those leaps. So I guess leaps and grace notes. And they're much more than that in the toolbox of composers about suggesting humor at different levels. Yes, false sadness, or bursts of joy, or just quotation at a moment we don't expect it. In the French tradition of the 19th century, there was a nursery song about we won't go to the woods to take a walk because it's raining. Nous n'irons plus au bois parce qu'il pleut. And purposely, of course, Debussy quotes it in his Jardin sous la pluie, Gardens under the rain. But of course, if one doesn't know that song, originally, as most people outside of the 19th century ending France, or early 20th century, and even so, it sounds like a playful theme, except that we don't know that it's a quote. Or you do that when you study and you become so doctoral in your knowledge. But then to translate that, cadence in G major, which is not right, but he uses the theme, and then it's very interesting to observe how some composers just need to quote, and some others just borrow to quote, and in fact it becomes a new piece because of the way they nest it in their own music. It's so beautifully humbling in many aspects to realize how much either they were aware, either they were quoting. But the borrowing by itself was not considered but an homage, or perhaps just a humor. And I think that Schumann, even if he was a reviewer and criticized a lot of composers in his writings, when he writes Chopin, it's such a tender-spirited humor. Wondering if I should apply to it the effects of the rubato that we so often expect to be the norm in Chopin. Hand in arpeggio, the right hand is singer, reminds me of Poulenc writing to one of his friends that he's composing a violin and piano sonata, and of course most of this tradition comes in France with the Franck and Fauré sonatas, where most of the piano part in chansons are arpeggiated, and the song is in the stringed players. So Poulenc writes to his friend, I'm writing a sonata for violin and piano, but it won't be a diva with harp. And so when I hear this, in retrospect, I always think with tenderness about the fact that it is harp with a diva singing, which is what you can sort of, by cliché, sort of demonstrate of Chopin, if you want to sort of make fun of Chopin. But it's done with such elegance and tenderness that it doesn't appear like a farcic thing. this song about not going to the woods for a walk because it's raining. It's a French nursery song. Here set by Debussy in his image from before Book 1, the so-called oubliées, forgotten images of 1890s, where he uses different aspects of this theme in a playful way. Even we heard the rain literally flow on the keyboard. So youthful Debussy was very cunning, funny. And Debussy had a great admiration for Éric Satie, who today we listen to with a little bit of respect, when in his time he was more a provocateur, and in many aspects he was even more than that. But he wrote Sports and Leisure, where he made fun of the different ways people live their lives. He wrote also Gymnopédies, everybody knows the melody. This leisurely piece, which he named purposely Naked Children in Greek, hymno, which gymnasts naked, and pedi, children. It was mostly about the fact that during ancient Greece, in the Olympic Games of the time, they had the athletes compete. And of course they competed naked. So in the end of the 19th century in Paris, the Baron de Coubertin, who was the initiator of the modern Olympic movement, wanted the French society to start exercising, and so bicycles were in vogue, and motorcycles and so forth. So everybody was starting to get in shape. And Satie, who was a very sarcastic humor man, he wrote this purposely gymnastics, but are very slow. It reminds you when they asked Churchill how come he came to become so old in such a good shape in his late years, and he said, no sport. So it's also provocative in that sense. And I would say that to play this is a comical example of music that is humorous. It takes a lot of degrees of knowing it, but nevertheless it is. It's sort of a way to mock the society that is rushing to be in shape, and he wants to be just lazy, and having this poetic melodic line, which, beautiful as it is, became more meaningful for the poetry of it than for the humorous posting itself to be. And same thing with Debussy's usage of the rain. And the song, nursery song about Nous n'irons plus au bois, we won't go to the woods because it's raining, in his Jardin sous la pluie as well. And Milhaud, who went to Brazil, enjoyed very much the pubs as a secretary of the ambassador of France, Claudel, and he wrote a whole ballet about being set in a bar or in a pub. And you can hear the conversations of the various people, using quotations of folkloric music, so it could be also a borrowing, and it is a borrowing of Brazilian popular music played in those bars of the time, and he called it the Ox on the Roof. And he used the usage of polytonality to make it so more even humorous and decadent. Or second theme. and provocative superpositions of different themes and different moods. Sometimes close to a crowded scene that is depicted this way, using quotations of Brazilian tangos of the day. That is the fact that composers did borrowings and quotations, more or less allowing that to be known, or sometimes just using it purely without even any restraint to honor its original counterparts. In any case, humor is something that is an infinite subject, and I fear that I don't have enough humor myself to sustain it all. I remember working on pieces that were very humorous, written for piano by Jean Francais, with Jean Francais as a coach, and he used to write these 5 encores for piano, for different stages of delirium or teasing of the audience, or for the sentimental ladies, as he called it. The first one was just to play as an encore after a recital if the audience is pleased. Of course, it's only a sample. And then for the, he calls it pour les dames sentimentales. And then it was in case of success. Case of delirium. Not exactly the whole piece, but that's the idea. So when I was working on these virtuosic pieces, while comical, he was sitting next to me, and he was an old man with a very young spirit at that point, at least for sure, and he has so many jokes and anecdotes and very elegant ways of making me play the piece with tasteful suggestion for what not to do. Like he told me at one point that it has to be played like music by Massenet, but with good taste. And he reminded me that when he was young, he was invited to audition for a job to write movie music, and the director who was auditioning him was famous French playwright, author Sacha Guitry, and he asked him to improvise in front of him spontaneously a second-class funeral music and then a first-class funeral music, to see if he can sense the difference between the quality and write a little bit more popular or vulgar and this little more elitist and less vulgar. And this kind of humor he was telling me while I was practicing in front of him how to play. And every time, of course, one thinks of these situations, one recalls the situations, but the music remains the vector of the humor itself. And I hope so much that it makes wholeheartedly the audiences laugh, not on the expense of the pianist. When you miss the note, miss. Count. Oh, okay, eliminated. Too many wrong notes. You passed over the quarter of 4 allowed or something. That's also humor, but a bit darker. Thank you.